Welcome, fellow refiners, to another episode of Refinement Not Retirement. That's the podcast that talks about refining your life in preference to retiring from it. My name is Tony Coe, and I co-host this podcast with my wife, soulmate, and life partner, Christine, who joins me today. If you're watching this on video, which you can do, you will see her. Hi, Christine.
Hi, good morning. Oh, yes, it is still morning.
It is still morning. So Christine is saying that because I've kept her waiting because I let the time run away with me when I was doing something else and we were supposed to get this done. We've been away for a little while. We've also been a bit sick, having had grandchildren visiting. And you know what happens when you have children around? They are little bacteria bags, aren't they? And you catch things. So we're recovering from that. So we apologize for the gap in our programming. But today we want to talk about another refinement that we made in our lives, which is we think has been a great improvement. And it's very topical at the moment. It's electric cars. Why is it topical? Well, we're getting closer and closer to the time when petrol and diesel vehicles, new ones, won't be allowed to be sold. Might seem a long way off, 2030, I mean. But it'll be here sooner than you think. And there's been a lot of pushback from people who don't think we'll be ready. And I agree with them. I don't think the country will be ready. But probably a lot of people are thinking at this time of changing their car for an electric one. And we thought, since we've been driving electric for quite a few years now, we thought
I was going to ask you that, Tony. How many years is it? Because we've been here 3 years, and I was trying to remember how many years we had one in London.
Good question. Well, we got our first one, which we'll talk about in a moment. We got our first one back in 2017.
Yes,
so
I was actually about to work that out because I thought,
yeah.
yes, because the second one was 2020, just before we left London.
Correct.
And we'd had the one before that for 3 years. So yeah, so we're 6 years. Wow.
Yes. So we get asked quite a lot about our experience, and certainly there'll be a lot of people who are thinking about it and will be reading quite negative press. I mean, there's all kinds of things about them bursting into flames, being too heavy for bridges, and so on and so on and so forth. And also, of course, the old hobby horses like the range anxiety, lack of charging infrastructure, and all that sort of thing. So we're going to tell you about our actual experience with all of those. Well, with most of those things, we certainly haven't any experience of anything bursting into flames, but we have got experience of the practical use of an electric car. So let's go right back to the beginning, how we started. First of all, Christine will tell you, and I'm sure she'll tell you right now, I'm a bit of a new device freak, right? Am I?
Yes, well, I was actually just about to start that because, of course, you're always leading the way with all these new inventions, and off you go and get involved in it. And here we go. And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go again. This one, as you rightly said, was what was the range anxiety for me, which absolutely freaked me out. And I was very happy driving a Lexus SUV, which was a lovely car, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I suppose that really was our first foray in a way, because it was a hybrid Lexus, a beautiful SUV, and we both loved driving it. But
yeah, we did.
I'd been sort of more and more interested in electric cars, been following Fully Charged, Rob Llewellyn's famous channel on YouTube, and learning, researching about electric cars. And the thing that I loved about the Lexus hybrid is when it ran on electric. Remember, it had because it was a hybrid, so it had a battery.
Yes, you used to enjoy playing with that, didn't you? And seeing how many miles you could get out of it. And it wasn't too many, was it?
Well, it was one. It'll do 1 mile.
1 mile? I thought it did 12.
No. It only did 1 mile, and that was if you were lucky.
Oh, that was
because
back then, right?
yeah, you had to really feather the accelerator not to prevent it from firing up the petrol engine. And I just thought, God, it's so lovely when you even just that mile, because of course we were living in the city then, so
Yeah,
a mile's quite a long way in the city, and
that's true.
it was just so quiet and lovely not to be puffing out fumes. And I thought, well, let's look more at this electric car thing. But of course, we were living in a flat in Kensington on the Gloucester Road, so right in the thick of things. There was no way that we could have a charger at home. You can't trail an electric cable, from a high level flat down to, well, there wasn't anywhere even to park near the building anyway. So that was completely out of the question. So I did a lot of scoping out of chargers, public chargers nearby, and took into account obviously the cost of charging on public, which is a lot more. Of course, it's vastly more now since the energy crisis, but back then it was a lot more than charging
But
at
this is
home.
before you chose the electric car, right? This is
Yes,
yes, yes.
yes,
This is the lead up to buying or getting our first electric
yes,
car.
yes. Well, I'd been researching them, and we eventually decided, I think wisely, to go for the BMW i3. Heck of a lot smaller than the Lexus. It's a bit like a TARDIS, really. It
Yeah, it
looks.
is. When you get inside, yeah, it's much bigger than you think. You as a big 6'2" person, it's going to look totally silly
Yeah,
in this car, but in fact, inside it was really very spacious, wasn't it?
it was. It was much more spacious, rather like the TARDIS inside than it looked from the outside. And I
But also, it had a little petrol tank, which of course they don't have anymore, do they? So
No,
you
well,
had
that was the crucial thing in the decision, because really, with electric cars, they advertise a range which is frankly pie in the sky, because that range that they advertise, the maximum range that they advertise, they all do it, is ideal conditions, so ideal temperature, because batteries have far less, give you far less range in cold weather than they do in hot or warm weather. So it's always they take the optimum. Electric cars also deplete their batteries much faster at high speed. It's the reverse, really, of fossil fuel vehicles. So when you're driving around town, you get a lot more range because you're driving at a slower speed, but you also have something to help you called regenerative braking, so that every time you slow the car down without using the brake pedal, it puts the electric motors or motors go into reverse, and they put the energy back, put some of the energy, I should say, back into the battery. So every time you slow down, not using the brake, which is very easy because it's not like a fossil fuel car in that you don't coast. As you take your foot off the accelerator, the car resists and slows down, and will slow down completely to a stop, and quite quickly. So that's something to get used to. People find it's called one pedal driving, and people find that one pedal driving really good after they get used to it. But that's why you get
oh,
more
it's
range.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah,
But on the
exactly.
motorway, if you were driving at 70 miles an hour, some people do a bit more than that. But if you're driving at the legal limit of 70 miles an hour on the motorway, you are going to deplete, you're going to get far less than the advertised range. So that's absolute pie in the sky. And I knew that by the research I'd done by then. So I think we made a wise decision with the BMW i3. First, it's an ideal little city car, very easy to park, very, very nippy, such fun to drive. But this version that we got was called the Rex, BMW i3 Rex. They no longer make them, but the Rex stands for Range Extender. And what BMW did very cleverly was they put a petrol engine a little petrol engine from a motorcycle in the boot, hidden away, very small. And that petrol engine acted as a dynamo. So it didn't drive the wheels directly, but what it did was charge up the battery, and it would kick in automatically once you got below a certain range. And that was ideal because we did have range anxiety in the sense, obviously, not for driving around town or even sort of Greater London, Surrey, that sort of area, that we were able to do those journeys quite comfortably, because the real range of the car, although advertised, I think it was 150 miles, it was really 100 miles max, really.
And the petrol tank, did it hold about 30 miles?
Yes, something like
about
that.
30 miles.
I think something like that, probably.
Yeah.
It was a very small petrol tank, so as long as you kept that.
But we used it very rarely. In fact, once we got into it, didn't we? Because we didn't need to. So it was a real safeguard if we suddenly thought, well, let's just switch it into that now, because we just want to get home, or we just want to.
Where it was essential, you may remember, Chris, was on long journeys. Not all of them, because there were, even in those days, there were rapid chargers in motorway stations, mainly offered by Ecotricity.
I don't think we ever used it, though, did we?
Yeah, we did. Oh, yes, we did. Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, we did. And in fact, you remember, I used to get very cross with the Ecotricity chargers because they were very often out of order. And we needed it for, well, obviously when we went to places like Dorset and long journeys like that, we would need to charge often, several times. When we came and saw our house, for instance, we still had the BMW i3, this new house in the Cotswolds.
Yes,
and we had to charge.
That was, I think we were 3 years in then.
In fact, you made the offer on the house from a rapid charger in Stratford-on-Avon, didn't you?
It was a
Instavolt.
An Instavolt, yes, at Bannatyne.
At a Bannatyne gym.
And
we got to realize that the charging infrastructure was poor and there weren't enough of them. But generally speaking, we could plan charges. But not only is it the fact that there are few of them and
often broken, or somebody on them that's not supposed to be on them,
but also they're often occupied by somebody else. So that would mean, and a charge takes at least 30 minutes. So that would mean that you would have to wait, and that's not ideal, is it? So, I mean, on top of the sort of charging time that you would need, which would be at least 30 minutes, you would then probably, if somebody had just gone on it, you'd have to wait 30 minutes. So that really wasn't very good.
Or people would go on it when they didn't need to, where just park there. Literally just parked there. They weren't even on, and that was irritating. In fact, we had that once, if you remember.
Yes.
I had to go inside and look for this person, and I said, "Can you make an announcement? These people are parked right on a charger with not even a car that needed charging, not an electric car." And that was so irritating.
Yeah, the technical term for that is when the charger is iced. In other words, there is an ICE car, internal combustion engine, sitting in the bay right by the thing and blocking it. That's being
that happened a lot. And then I think so when did the on street charging come in, that you were part of the sort of program in Kensington on the lamppost, because that was quite an interesting time in our lives.
It was indeed. So back in 2017, there was, I can't remember the name of the company, but there was Source London or something like that. There was one company that really had the monopoly, but I also had the advantage, you may remember, of being able to take the car to Sainsbury's and charge for free on a pod point. Those days are now gone, because supermarkets are taking them out because of the cost of energy, obviously. That you can't do. I don't think you can do that anywhere anymore. I doubt it. Not that we need to. But then, after some time, another company came in, and I'm afraid I've forgotten their name as well, who actually started putting charging points in the lampposts on the
Well, that
street.
was a joke, wasn't it?
Well, actually, it was a game changer. It was very
No,
helpful.
but I meant, you know why I'm saying it was a
Yes.
joke.
So I mean, this is the whole problem with the government's approach, really. Not only the government, but local government in general.
And our council.
The council were just hopeless. I mean, okay, credit to them for allowing this company to put the charging points in the lamppost, but can you believe it? They didn't reserve places next to the lampposts for electric cars. So anyone could park there quite legally, and they didn't want to, I did approach them about this and said it was nuts. Kensington and Chelsea Council this was, and they said, well, we can't upset the residents, well, what's the point of having electric? You want people to move to electric to have clean air in London, and yet you're putting charging points in that can't be used because they're obviously going to be blocked by people.
Well, we were residents, and you paid for residents parking, fair enough, £150 a year for a K&C, but it meant that the residents, it wouldn't have meant taking that many parking spaces away from the Kensington and Chelsea just for the electric car people.
Well, it was
right?
completely bonkers.
It was crazy.
And there was a guy up there, you may remember, who eventually agreed to meet me, who was
from Imperial, wasn't he?
No. This was the leader of the council.
From the council.
And he had a rather silly little electric thing called a Twizy or something. It was the three-wheeler.
It was like a motorbike with a cover, wasn't it?
That's right.
2 wheels or 3 wheels or something.
And he was a very nice guy, and he clearly wanted the electric thing to work, but I mean, it was just so wet, really, the whole approach, because he said, oh, well, it's so political, we can't get people to do this, and that's really the government's whole problem. I mean, actually, they're pretty much bad at everything, but on this electric thing, it's no good announcing that that you're going to ban new sales of fossil fuel cars by 2030 and then doing nothing really effectively to make that happen. And it's even true of Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London. I mean, he talks all the time about clean air, etc., but I found him absolutely hopeless when I tried to approach his organization about improving the charging infrastructure. Completely hopeless.
It was bad enough, and we got used to it. But because we were residents and we didn't have our own parking space, we would, in a regular car, we would come back and we would always find something with a K&C, for our yearly residence parking permit, and it sometimes meant a bit of a further walk, but there was always somewhere. It had a very good coverage. And then when we got the BMW, if you remember, it would be residence permits. I think it was anybody could park after a certain time, wasn't it? After 6 o'clock in a residence permit, and at weekends, I think, or after 1 o'clock. I can't remember an all-day Sunday. So it meant we had the added value. We'd come back after being out somewhere, and we'd need to park the car, charge it, because we couldn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
So sometimes you used to have to look out of our window or drive a long way and then walk back.
Yeah, sometimes I'd have to walk for at least half an hour.
Yes, and then you'd find that, or you'd find somebody on it that, like you said, that happened all the time. They had a permit, but they didn't.
But they were perfectly entitled to do it.
Card. Which, of course, they were.
They were entitled to block the charges. That's the point that I'm making. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged too much down in that issue.
No, but it was interesting. It was an interesting that those 3 years in London, when we were, right ahead of the game, and that's 6 years ago now. I think, just going back to that I think they have improved a lot, but it wasn't really until
what's improved a lot? Sorry.
The charging infrastructure, I think, in London. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know
what's happening.
we're not in touch with anyone, but I don't know that they've improved the particular issue that we're talking about of the charging
Maybe not.
lampposts.
Yeah.
I don't
And I
know.
don't think,
Maybe they have. I
yeah.
hope they have, because it's bonkers. I mean, it's completely bonkers. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
Our next electric car, of course. So what I would say about the BMW i3, it convinced us, although it had the range extender, that we didn't really need a range extender. And also that meant, for tax purposes, as things moved on, that it was classified as a hybrid. So that was a bit of a problem. By the way, that's the way they do the London taxes, the so-called electric London taxis. They have range extenders in them, so they're not truly pure electric cars. But we decided that we wouldn't, we had convinced ourselves that range anxiety wasn't a big enough issue to prevent us going pure electric. But also the big reason why we could now move on from that was we moved out of London.
No, but hang on, we hadn't when we got the next car, the Kona.
No, but I mean, but I'm speeding this along a bit because I don't want to get too bogged down in our personal story, because I want to help people with their decision about making buying an electric car for themselves. So I'm speeding this on a bit, if you'll bear with me. So we when we moved out of London, you're right that we acquired it just before we moved out of London, but we moved on to the Hyundai Kona. So the BMW was a fantastic car, but it was a little bit like driving a go-kart. I mean, it didn't really feel like a solid SUV.
Proper car, yeah.
No. Whereas the Kona did. I mean, I don't know what you think, but
I love the Kona. Yes,
I thought the Kona was great. I mean, it looked like an SUV. It was, it really looked like a proper car. It was solid.
Lovely car. Yeah.
It had a far better range. I think it had a range of around 300 miles on,
Yeah, it did.
That was the advertised
300.
range.
Yeah, I think it was about 280. Yeah.
Probably near a real world 200, but it was great, and it became really great when we moved to the Cotswolds, because now for the first time ever we had the joy of being able to plug our car into our house whenever we liked, and the next morning we would have a full tank of full battery, and that was terrific because that was super cheap, especially when we acquired, obviously, solar panels. It made it even cheaper, but it was great being able to do that. We were on Octopus and we were Energy, and we were getting the overnight cheap rate, which I think was only 5p per kilowatt
Yeah, it
hour.
was.
And it was really terrific, and that was a terrific car to drive. But
until
so the big thing for us was getting our first Tesla. So the Tesla Model 3, your car, which I mean, there's so much I could say about Teslas. The Hyundai Kona is not is a pure electric car, but it's a fossil fuel car that they also do a version in pure electric. So that means it's not in every. It's Hyundai, although they're a great company. They're not. They certainly weren't at that time. They weren't specialists in electric. Tesla are specialists in electric. They have only built electric cars. They only ever have built electric cars, and that means the tech is just fantastic.
Yeah,
and the main thing about Tesla is that they are the only motor manufacturer that had the sense to realize that it's all about the charging. The long distance, when you're doing a long distance drive, you've got to be able to charge easily with no hassle. And that's what they did. They built their own supercharging network, not only here all over the UK, but all over the world. You can drive across Europe. The beautiful thing about the Tesla is the car tells you everything. It does everything for you. So it knows where you're going. It knows how much you're going to need to charge. It knows where you should charge. It knows how long you should charge for.
Preconditions when it's on its way to charge.
Preconditions the battery when it knows you're going to a supercharger.
I think they should change that song, Tony. It's
What?
all about the charge. Don't worry. It's all about the charge. Don't worry.
Yes, well,
Not the
they
base,
take
but the
all
charge.
the headaches out of that and make it simple. And they even tell you, they even know when the chargers are not, are fully in use. And since Tesla has become very, very big and successful, now their supercharging stations, which are fantastic, are do get full. So it knows when there's no availability, and it sends you to the next one. It does it all for you.
Or it limits you to the X amount of charge, so that if people are waiting,
Yes,
can
the
get
tech
on
is so
them.
clever that obviously it knows where all the cars are going because it's in their sat nav, and it tells them when they have to move on. They are also the only people, as far as I know, that have or certainly were back then, that have a fining system, so that if you stay on the charger after you've charged your battery, very quickly, I mean,
Yeah,
within a couple of minutes, they start charging you a surcharge. So you are incentivized to move off. Crikey, they've really thought the thing out well. And the car itself is just a joy to drive, and it has what are called over-the-air updates. So rather like your iPhone, well, exactly like your iPhone, you will get software updates all the time, and the software updates that you get, you might get 2 a month. The software updates that you get, they improve the car. They can even improve the performance of the battery. They improve things all the time. They add new features. So you're driving a new car.
new notes all the time. There's a
Brilliant.
slight problem in what you're saying, though, Tony. I have to bring this up because we have been so spoiled. Is that it's not a cheap car.
No.
We are very, very, very lucky to be able to have one. In fact, we have two, and I don't mean to boast, but they are very expensive. So although we're promoting this fabulous car,
Well,
sadly, it's not for everybody.
I was intending to talk about the negatives.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
But
I know. It's just that when I think people are listening, sometimes they're going, "Oh my God, this is so gorgeous," but we can't afford it.
It's not just Teslas, of course. Electric cars generally are far more
Yes,
expensive
yeah,
than they
yeah,
should be, and
yeah.
that's certainly the case. So after we got the Tesla Model 3, which was your car, I decided to get the Hyundai's new Ioniq Special. It was brilliant, absolutely beautiful car. But the thing was, by then I'd been spoilt by the Tesla experience.
I know, that's the problem.
Though the Ioniq, and it's special edition, it had even had solar panels on the roof. And I've never had a car that's such a head turner, where people come up to you and say, "Oh, what a beautiful car," etc. And that, even including the Tesla, that hasn't happened, because I don't think Teslas are necessarily beautiful to look at. But the Hyundai Ioniq was. And I loved it, but I'd been spoilt by the Tesla experience, and after a couple of months of getting it, of course, because we wanted an SUV, didn't we, to replace our SUV?
Yes.
And
yeah.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get the Tesla Y at that time. But we got a note. I forget where we were, but we got a note saying that they'd opened up Tesla Y orders. Just about 2 months, I think it was, after we'd had the Ioniq. And we said, just let's order one, let's not, silly little things like with the Tesla, you don't even have to bother about a key or anything, it knows you're there because you're there with your phone. You don't even have a start button, silly thing to press. What do you need a start button for? The Teslas don't have them. You just get in and you drive it. So we got the Tesla Y, and we now have a Tesla Model 3 and a Tesla Y. Tesla Y is bigger, it's an SUV, and it's great. I'm not going to talk any more about Teslas because I'm just going to tell you, first of all, driving an electric vehicle is different to driving a fossil vehicle. You have instant power immediately, and they're so fast, it's unbelievable, really.
I don't think we could ever go back, could we? I don't think we'll ever be able to go back.
No, you get regenerative braking. Everything works well. The tech is fantastic. They're great fun to drive. And they're just better. I mean, they need very little servicing because there are far fewer moving parts, obviously, because they don't have engines. They have electric motors. In fact, the Teslas you don't have servicing, really. So you've got to do things like tires and obviously stuff like that. But there are some negatives, and you need to be aware of them. First of all, they're super expensive. They're far too expensive. They shouldn't be this expensive. And the only brakes really are for people who are running businesses, which we were at that time. Of course, we're now refined, but people who are running businesses have tax breaks on them, which are considerable. Well, why isn't that available to everyone? That should be, for God's sake, government, don't be so ridiculous. Give people tax incentives and other incentives to drive, to go electric, if you want people to go electric, which you apparently do. But at the moment, your approach is absolutely ridiculous. So they're super expensive. That's got to go. Obviously, as they become, rather like with flat screen TVs, once they become popular and people are buying them in bigger numbers, then the cost will go down. We're already seeing that. Tesla are reducing their prices, to discuss the fact that they require little servicing. But there are some other aspects which are not great. The ride tends to be crashy. You don't get the same ride with an electric car that you get with a high-end Mercedes or BMW that's a fossil vehicle. Because everything has to be super light, because and thin and reducing friction. So you don't get that. So we have a friend who bought a Tesla Y the same time as we did, and he used to love his Range Rover. He loves his Tesla Y and all the tech involved, but he's all the time talking about, I want to get back to that Range Rover ride. Well, I believe Range Rover are going to come out with an electric. If they do that, rather like Jaguar did with the I-Pace, and they do a fantastic finish on that, you're going to sacrifice range if you go for a more comfy ride. So that isn't good. So be aware that the electric car ride is different. It's a lot firmer, and I would use the expression crashy. So, want to wrap up? We haven't got very long. What else do you want to add to that, Chris?
Nothing, I don't think. I think I've chipped in enough. I haven't got anything more to say other than I'm just very happy that we've had and have got the experience and the joy and the to be able to drive electric cars. I feel very lucky and very honoured, and it's really enhanced our lifestyle. I think I feel very excited about driving it down to the Dordogne in France this summer.
Yeah.
At the end of this summer, we're going to drive down. It'll be our first experience into
We're going
Europe.
to take both Teslas, aren't we? Because our son-in-law is going to drive the other one. So that'll be
I'm
an
looking forward
adventure.
to that little adventure. Yeah, and yes, I can't say anything more than that. I think it's just it's all for me. It's all positives. I just love it.
But in terms of advising other people, now I will tell you that enthusiastic though I am, I've advised all our daughters, all four of them, not to go electric. It's too expensive. But not only that, they're running, very busy lives. They're doing jobs, the demanding jobs, and we can afford to wait around for half an hour, 45 minutes to charge on a journey. Because we don't have work anymore. But it's not the same. The cost is way too high, and the sort of car that they could afford. I remember one of my daughters was going to get a smart car in the electric form, and I said, "Don't. You'll regret it." She lives in Hastings, does a lot of long distance driving, and the real range of that is sort of more like 70, 80 miles, although they advertise much more. She says to me recently, "I'm so glad, we were going to get the electric version. I'm so glad you stopped me from getting it." Well, not that I stopped her, I just advised her against it, make that clear. But the cost has to come down, and the government has to just be sensible about this, and help people, provide the tax breaks and the other incentives that they can provide if they want people to make this change, which is going to be fantastic for the environment. It's lovely, imagine you didn't have all these smelly things driving around puffing toxins into the air. So the charging infrastructure outside of Tesla needs to get a lot better. They need to model these charging companies, and they need to model themselves on model their charging network on what Tesla has done. The costs of charging have to come down, because now with the energy crisis, that has become ridiculous. You know, long distance driving is much more expensive than charging at home. And we have to get back to where that was much more affordable than fossil fuels. It's the other way on long distances now, and that's unsustainable. So that's my sort of overall feeling about it. And I hope that the government will do the things that they need to do, because it is completely unviable to ban the sale of new fossil fuel cars by 2030 on our current trajectory. So I hope you found that useful. If you want us to go deeper into this subject, if it's something that you'd like to raise questions with, you know how you can do that via our Facebook page or directly via the Spotify podcast app. You can do that. You raise questions with us, and you want us to do more on this, we're very happy to do so. Any final words, Chris?
No.
Okay.
Final words is no.
Okay. Final word is no. Not quite your final word, because for now, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.